The arrogant fighter held the choke too long, enjoying her struggle. He was the king of this combat gym, but he never imagined the girl's father was Jason Statham, and he was watching from the doorway. The Apex Combat gym smelled of iron, sweat, and ambition. It was a cathedral of controlled violence, where heavy bags swayed like condemned men and the rhythmic thud of gloves on pads was the daily sermon. For Maya Statham, 19 and fiercely independent, this was her proving ground. For 3 months, she poured everything into her training, driven by a quiet need to forge an identity separate from the long shadow cast by her famous father. She never mentioned his name, wanting her skill, not her bloodline, to earn her respect. Today, that respect would be put to the test. The advanced sparring session was heating up when Cade, the Vice Jensen, made his entrance. Cade was a physical specimen, a local MMA prospect whose talent was eclipsed only by his monumental ego. He moved through the gym like he owned it, his gaze lingering on newer members with predatory assessment. His method of welcoming them was notorious, pushing them past their limits under the guise of tough love, a brutal hazing ritual that fed his own sense of superiority. Most members resented it, but Cade's skill and the gym owner's favor kept them silent. When Maya was paired with him, she gave a respectful nod, her guard up, expecting a challenging but fair role. But from the first touch of the gloves, she knew this wasn't about training. It was about dominance. Cade didn't flow, he bulldozed. He used his significant weight and strength advantage not to teach, but to crush. A smirk played on his lips as he effortlessly shut down her attempts at technique. "You've got some fire for a little thing," he murmured, his voice a low growl meant only for her. "Let's see how long it lasts." Before she could create space, his arms wrapped around her neck with practiced speed, locking in a standing guillotine choke. It wasn't a technical application meant to force a quick tap. It was a punishing, air-stealing clamp designed to humiliate. His forearm, thick as a steel pipe, pressed hard against her windpipe, digging in with cruel intent. The world began to shrink to a pinhole of light. Maya slapped his bicep once, then twice, the universal signal of surrender. Cade didn't let go. He tightened his grip, hoisting her slightly onto her toes, making an example of her. Around them, the gym's chaos continued, the other fighters lost in their own battles. The head coach was at the far end of the mats, overseeing a grappling drill. No one saw, no one but Maya, whose lungs were screaming for air and whose panic was quickly turning to a cold, rising fury. This wasn't a spar. It was an assault. Through the blurry, star-spangled edges of her vision, Maya saw the gym's entrance door swing open. A figure stepped inside, silhouetted against the bright afternoon light. He was of average height, dressed in dark jeans, a plain gray t-shirt, and a lightweight black jacket, a stark contrast to the gym's inhabitants clad in shorts and rash guards. His head was shaved, his expression unreadable from a distance. He stood for a beat, his gaze sweeping across the scene with an unnerving stillness. He took in the caged fighting area, the grunting athletes, and a man who was slowly choking the life out of his daughter. Jason Statham had arrived. He'd come unannounced, hoping to catch the end of her session and surprise her for a late lunch. He wasn't looking for trouble, but in that single, all-encompassing glance, he processed the entire situation with the cold efficiency of a predator. He saw the desperate tension in Maya's body, the arrogant smirk on Cade's face, and the undeniable fact that she had tapped out seconds ago and was still trapped. An arctic chill settled over Statham's demeanor. He didn't rush. He didn't shout. He moved with a deliberate, almost casual certainty, his soft-soled boots making no sound on the concrete floor. Each step seemed to draw an invisible line in the sand, subtly pulling the attention of those nearest to him. By the time he reached the edge of the matted area, the head coach had finally noticed the prolonged choke and was turning toward them, a frown creasing his brow. "Hey," Statham's voice cut through the noise. It was quiet, calm, with a distinct, gravelly British edge that sliced through the air like a razor. "Let her go." Cade glanced over his shoulder, his focus broken, annoyance flashing in his eyes. "Mind your business, old man." We're just training." Statham's voice dropped a register, losing its calm and gaining a serrated edge. "I said, let her go." There was a quality in that tone, a promise of absolute, unflinching violence that made the hairs on Cade's neck stand on end. He hesitated, the smirk faltering for the first time. He loosened his grip. Maya stumbled away, gasping for air, her hands immediately going to her bruised throat as she coughed violently. Statham's eyes, cold and gray as a winter sea, never left Cade's. "Step away from her," he commanded. The volume didn't increase, but the intensity filled the space, silencing the nearby pads and grunts. Cade, trying to reclaim his authority, puffed out his chest. "You got a problem? This is a real gym. If she can't handle the heat, she should stay in the kitchen." Statham tilted his head, a gesture of mock consideration. "You think choking a girl who's already tapped is handling the heat?" he asked, his voice dangerously soft. "That's not training. That's not strength. That's you, screaming your insecurities to the whole world." A few of the fighters nearby stopped their drills, their attention now fully captured. The air crackled. Cade, feeling the eyes on him, straightened up, tried to project an image of control. "Listen, I don't know who you think you are, coming into my gym and—" "You don't need to know who I am," Statham interrupted, taking a deliberate step onto the mats. His presence felt heavy, immovable. "All you need to know is that you put your hands on my daughter." The word hung in the air. "Daughter." Cade's eyes darted from Maya, who was now standing straighter, her breathing evening out, back to the man in front of him. A flicker of recognition, then disbelief, crossed his face. "My name," Maya said, her voice raspy but firm, "is Maya Statham." The name landed like a physical blow. But Cade's pride was a fortress. He couldn't back down now, not in front of everyone. So what? Action hero or not? On these mats, reputation means nothing. You want to make an issue of it? We can settle it right here. Statham studied him for a long, silent moment. "You're absolutely sure that's what you want?" Cade's bravado surged back, mistaking Statham's stillness for hesitation. "I don't back down. Not for anyone." Statham gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. "Good," he said, the word clipped and final. "Because I find words are a terribly inefficient way to teach a lesson." The unspoken challenge electrified the gym. The remaining fighters abandoned their workouts, forming a silent, expectant circle. The head coach looked on, conflicted but intrigued, recognizing a situation that was now far beyond his control. Statham methodically took off his jacket, folded it with precise, neat movements, and placed it on a nearby bench. He rolled his shoulders once, a simple motion that seemed to ripple with contained power. Maya moved to the edge of the circle, her hand protectively on her neck, her gaze locked on her father. Cade cracked his knuckles, a cocky grin spreading across his face. He was already picturing the story he'd tell, the day he took down the famous Jason Statham. But this wasn't a movie scene. This was a lesson, and Cade was about to discover the terrifying difference between a dojo bully and a man who had made a living from understanding violence in its purest form. He was about to learn that some men are not storms you walk into. They're the calm, deadly eye at the center of it. Cade lunged first, explosive telegraph move. He shot in for a double-leg takedown, aiming to use his wrestling base to overpower the older man and put him on his back. It was a move that had worked on countless opponents. It didn't work on Jason Statham. Statham didn't retreat. He didn't even seem to move. He simply lowered his center of gravity and met Cade's charge. With a subtle pivot and a perfectly timed sprawl, he redirected all of Cade's forward momentum. Cade found himself driving into empty space, his face plowing into the mat with a dull thud. He'd been countered so effortlessly it felt like he'd tripped over his own feet. "First mistake," Statham said, his voice a calm, instructional monotone. He hadn't even broken a sweat. "You fight with your ego. You assumed I would move like everyone else." Scrambling up, his face flushed with embarrassment, Cade snarled and came again. This time he feinted low and, threw a wild, powerful overhand right, a punch meant to end the confrontation then and there. Statham moved his head an inch off the center line. The punch whistled past his ear. In that same instant, Statham's left hand shot out, not to block, but to parry, deflecting Cade's arm slightly outward. His right hand clamped onto the back of Cade's neck. Using the bigger man's own momentum, Statham spun him, guiding him past, and then pulling him back, off balance and exposed. Statham's palm landed on Cade's chest. It wasn't a strike. It was a firm, controlled, open-handed push delivered with perfect timing and kinetic force. Cade's feet left the ground. He hit the mat flat on his back, the impact knocking the wind out of him with an audible whoosh. Gasps rippled through the watching crowd. It was brutally efficient and utterly dismissive. Statham stood over him, hands relaxed at his sides. Second mistake, he continued, his tone unchanged. You confuse aggression with strategy. A real fighter doesn't just throw power. He places it. Cade lay there, sucking in ragged breaths, humiliation burning hotter than any physical pain. This wasn't happening. He was being systematically dismantled, toyed with in his own domain. His reputation was evaporating with every passing second. Pride, raw and wounded, surged through him. You think you can lecture me? He spat, forcing himself to his feet. He abandoned all technique, charging forward with a furious, desperate roar, swinging wildly. Statham sidestepped the clumsy attack, and as Cade blundered past, he placed a hand on his back and simply pushed. Cade stumbled forward, arms flailing, and crashed face first into the padded wall of the caged enclosure. He slumped to the mat, defeated not by a knockout blow, but by his own uncontrolled rage. Statham walked over to his jacket, picked it up, and slung it over his shoulder. He turned to Maya. You all right? She nodded, a universe of pride and relief in her eyes. I'm fine, Dad. Good, he said. Let's go. He started for the exit, his lesson seemingly complete. He had proven his point without throwing a single punch. But as he reached the door, a low, venomous mutter cut through the silence from the floor. Stick to your action movies, old man. Statham stopped dead in his tracks. His shoulders tensed. Slowly, deliberately, he turned back around. The calm, instructional demeanor was gone. The look in his eyes was flat, cold, and utterly devoid of mercy. And for the first time, Cade realized his lesson wasn't over. It had just begun. The atmosphere in the gym underwent a phase shift. The quiet tension of a lesson being taught evaporated, replaced by the bone-deep chill of genuine menace. When Statham turned back, he wasn't a teacher anymore. He was the man from the movies Cade had just mocked. Only there were no cameras, no stunt doubles, no director to yell cut. There was only the cold, hard reality of the floor and the man walking back towards him. Statham dropped his jacket without looking. He didn't walk this time. He glided across the mat, closing the distance with a predator's economy of motion. Cade scrambled to his feet, trying to muster some semblance of a defensive stance, but his bravado had curdled into a knot of pure fear in his stomach. You want the movie's star? Statham's voice was a low rumble, a promise of pain. All right, let's give the audience a show. Before Cade could even process the words, Statham exploded into motion. It was a blur of devastating efficiency. He didn't throw a punch. He entered Cade's space, his lead hand flashing out to trap Cade's right arm at the bicep. Simultaneously, his left hand snaked around Cade's neck, not for a choke, but for control. With a brutal twist of his hips and a sharp tug, he spun Cade off balance and slammed him sideways into the chain link wall of the cage. The rattle of the metal echoed through the silent gym. Cade's head bounced off the fence, dazing him. Statham gave him no time to recover. He pinned Cade against the wall with his body weight. One forearm pressed firmly across his throat, restricting his breathing just enough to induce panic. You like to choke people who can't fight back? Statham snarled, his face inches from Cade's. How does it feel when the shoe's on the other foot? He released the pressure on the throat, only to transition into an arm lock. He wrenched Cade's arm into a position it was never meant to go, forcing a pained grunt from the younger man. The pressure was immense, a hair's breadth from a compound fracture. I could take this arm home as a souvenir, Statham said, his voice chillingly conversational. I could shatter this elbow into so many pieces, the surgeons would need a blueprint to put it back together. Sweat poured down Cade's face, his eyes wide with terror. He finally understood. This wasn't about winning or losing. This was about survival. Okay. I get it. I'm sorry. No, Statham growled, applying another sharp, agonizing spike of pressure that made Cade cry out. Sorry is a word. Understanding is a feeling. I want you to feel this. I want you to remember this feeling every time you even think about using your size to bully someone weaker than you. He held the lock for another 5 agonizing seconds, burning the sensation of utter helplessness into Cade's memory. Then, with a final contemptuous shove, he released him. Cade crumpled to the floor, clutching his arm, whimpering. Statham stood over him, a figure of absolute authority. Strength isn't about how hard you can hit, he said, his voice now calm again, but carrying the weight of the violence he had just unleashed. It's about having the control, not to. It's about protecting people like her. He gestured with his chin toward Maya. You failed that test. Miserably. Without another glance at the broken man on the floor, Statham turned, retrieved his jacket, and walked toward his daughter. The crowd of fighters parted for him like the sea before Moses, their expressions a mixture of awe, fear, and profound respect. Some instinctively bowed their heads. They had come to the gym to see fighting, but they had just witnessed something else entirely. The complete deconstruction of a bully. Maya met him at the edge of the mat, her eyes shining. The earlier fear was gone, replaced by a fierce, unshakable pride. Thank you, Dad, she whispered. Statham put an arm around her shoulder, his harsh demeanor melting away, replaced by the simple, protective warmth of a father. You never need me to fight your battles, Maya, he said, his voice soft enough for only her to hear. But you will never, ever fight them alone. Together, they walked out of the gym and into the afternoon sun, leaving behind a silence that was heavier than any weight in the room. Cade remained on the floor for a long time, clutching his throbbing arm. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the crushing weight of his public humiliation. The crown he thought he wore had been shattered, and his throne had been kicked out from under him. The incident at Apex Combat Gym became the stuff of legend. Cade Jensen was never the same. The swagger was gone, replaced by a quiet, haunted caution. He eventually left the gym. In his absence, a new, unwritten rule emerged among the members, a code of conduct they half-jokingly called the Statham Rule. It was simple. You respect the tap. Always. You help your training partners improve. You don't use them to inflate your ego. The gym's culture shifted, becoming less about predatory dominance and more about collective strength and genuine respect. The story serves as a raw, powerful reminder that true strength isn't found in the ability to dominate the weak, but in the discipline to protect them. It's a lesson that resonates far beyond the walls of any gym. What does real strength mean to you? Have you ever witnessed someone stand up for another in a way that changed the atmosphere? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's have a real conversation about this. And if this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe for more content that matters. Let's always comment with respect.